One. We're live.
Good evening. Welcome to the December 3rd City Council meeting. I'm Gina Louise Shara, and I will be presiding this evening. This meeting and all who participate in it with us on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. We will begin as always with public comment. If you know you wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. To raise your hand, you click on participants in the horizontal menu bar at the bottom of your screen. A column will open up with the participants to the meeting. The raise hand feature is at the bottom of that column. If you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. If you're having trouble raising your hand, you may use the chat feature to send a message to me. I'll do my best to monitor that for people having technical troubles, but that's the only purpose for which we'll use that function, and it'll only be used during public comment. I'll unmute each raised hand one by one and ask if you'd like to make a comment. When you begin, please state your name and your city or town for the public record. To ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to speak, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I will ask you to please finish your sentence. According to council rules, we do not respond during public comment as it's your time to speak. So while your comment should be directed to us, you'll understand when we don't respond to you. You may speak on any topic. It doesn't need to be on an item on the agenda. I ask that all but the council turn off your video until called upon, as comments are directed to the council and only the person recognized has the floor. We'll do our best to act quickly if someone is clearly acting in a way that's inappropriate, deploying profanity or slurs, or displaying something outside of what one would expect in council chambers. And I'll remove anyone that needs to be removed from the meeting. If you don't wish to make a comment, we ask that you watch on Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media through their YouTube channel or their other platforms. The recording of this meeting will be available at Northampton Open Media's Government Video Archive channel on YouTube. And I thank them as always for that public service. I'll remind people we're always happy to receive comments by email, which are equally part of the public record. So please email us at citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. And I don't yet see any hands. So again, if you're here, if you want to make a public comment, now is the time. Raise your hand or send me a chat. But I don't see anyone. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay. I guess no one is here for public comment. So we will convene the meeting. Laura, will you please call the roll?
Councillor Dwight.
Uh-oh, hold up. I'm going to unmute
Here.
And
Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
here.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
Councillor Quinlan.
Here.
Councillor Shara.
Here.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, our first item on the agenda is an update. So according to Mass General Law, Chapter 7C, Section 37, we need to read into the record a notice of intent by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to purchase an agricultural preservation restriction, an APR, on farmland in Northampton. This is APR project name Omasta, John P. and Fay, project ID 20B02. So I'm going to read the notice, and then you'll see later on the agenda there's a vote on a request to reduce the 120-day notice to 60 days. So what I need to do is read the second page in this document, which is a notice of proposed acquisition of an agricultural preservation restriction on property in the city of Northampton. Date of this notice is November 2nd, 2020. Notice of proposed acquisition is hereby given to the mayor of the city of Northampton. Separate notice will be given by the department to the appropriate city commissioners, regional planning agency, and the members of the general court representing the district in which the land is located. In compliance with Mass General Law, Chapter 7C, Section 37, the Commonwealth, Massachusetts, acting by and through its Department of Agricultural Resources, the department, hereby gives notice that it proposes to acquire an agricultural preservation restriction, APR, on the real property identified herein for the purpose of protecting in perpetuity its superior and productive agricultural resources by preventing their conversion to other uses. The application received by MDAR indicates that the property is owned by John P. and Faye Omasta and consists of parcel located at West Farm Road in Northampton as approximately represented on the attached map. The APR may encompass all or parts of the area shown. The current use of the property is primarily for hay, pasture, and small-scale forest products. Following the recording of the APR, the use of the subject property is limited to agricultural use as more particularly set forth in the APR document, the general laws, chapter 184, sections 31, and the regulations of the department, 330 CMR 22.00, and I don't know what that stands for. Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, signed by Ronald A. Hall, APR Acquisition Coordinator. So I have now read that into the record, and we will leave that, and then we will vote on reducing that notice in a little bit. Next up we have recognitions or 1-minute announcements by counselors. Also, committee chair updates. Oh, it's very quiet this evening. Okay. Then we will move to an update that we had this evening by Public Health Director Meredith O'Leary and Mayor Narkowitz on COVID-19. So I asked them to join us a couple weeks ago for an update, and we thank them so much for being here. This update, as I said, has been planned, but as yesterday and today, we have hit new highest numbers of new cases in the Commonwealth. This timing seems particularly appreciated, as I'm sure there are lots of questions and anxiety. Oh wait, I'm sorry, did I miss a 1-minute announcement? I missed it, I don't see, no? Okay. So thank you so much, Director O'Leary, for being here, and Mayor Narkowitz. I don't know who wants to go first, but welcome, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I would have Director O'Leary start. That's she leads off all of our emergency team meetings, so it seems appropriate for her to lead off.
Thank you, Mayor. So that's correct. We meet twice a week, our emergency management team, and all of the department heads on the team give updates about what's going on specific to COVID. And I always like to lead off with data. I give global data, I give national data, I give state data, and I give local data. Of course, local data is what we're most concerned about. And I'll just kind of give you a little glimpse of what's going on here in Northampton. Currently, Northampton, since the beginning of COVID, we have had 476 cases. Since October, November, and December, we've had 146 cases. So 146 of the 476 have been in the last 3 months. Prior to that, in September, we had 2 cases. August, I think we had maybe 1 or 2. Our numbers were extremely low throughout the end of summer into the beginning of fall. So we can see what's happening on the national level. We're trending the same way here in the county and in Northampton. So out of those cases, 199 of them have come out of a long-term healthcare facility. And that can be anything from a nursing home, a skilled nursing facility, a rest home. So anywhere where residents are they reside and there's not any risk of community transmission happening. They're very much contained. So everything outside of that 199 cases, which is about 42% of our overall cases, is what we call community transmission. We can't quite identify how it's happening, but it's not in residential clusters. So out of the 146 cases that we've seen over the last 3 months, only 15% of 15 cases, which is about 10%, have been in our long-term healthcare facilities, where conversely, back in April, when we were in our first surge, over 65% of our cases were in long-term healthcare facilities, and the remainder were what we call community transmission. So there's a lot more community transmission happening now and less happening in our long-term healthcare facilities. So the fact of the matter that the numbers are rising in the US and rising in our county and locally indicates that we're going to have a rapid acceleration of cases, especially with the Thanksgiving holiday just happening. People traveled, people had indoor, congregating indoors with their family members and friends. We've kind of seen this trend happen with all of our holidays. We'll be kind of going on a slow incline. Then we have a holiday, and about 14 days to 21 days later, we kind of see a steep incline in cases. So we're expecting the same to happen because of the Thanksgiving holiday that we had, but we actually expect it to be a little more severe because our prior holidays were the weather was a bit warmer. So people might have been getting together, but it was outside. So it'll be very interesting. I expect to see cases coming in from holiday gatherings this weekend and really have an impact on our community about 2 weeks from now. So I'll be watching that extremely closely. So besides what's happening in terms of cases, what I'm also looking at all the time is our incident rate and our positivity rate. Our positivity rate is out of how many tests that are administered, what percent of them are positive. And the kind of benchmark that everybody sets is 5%. If we're hitting 5%, that means we should be really pulling back and shutting things down again. That's kind of the scary number that's been thrown out there. Currently, the state puts out every single week on Thursdays, they put out a weekly report where you can get a little more granular data. And today's report said the city of Northampton's positivity rate is 1.15%. Last week, we were at 1.24%. And at the beginning of November, I think we were at 0.33%. So you can see how that has grown. Again, it coincides with the growth of our cases. So that's nothing shocking to me. If you want to put it in context, the state positivity rate is 3.73%. And this positivity rate is over a span of time. It's over 14 days. That's what they're giving to you, because daily positivity rates, they ebb and flow like this. So it's better if you take chunks of time and look at the trends. So I'm looking at daily trends. I'm looking at weekly trends, biweekly trends, monthly trends, you name it. That's what I'm looking at. So if we take the positivity rate for the state today, just this one day, it's over 8%. I think it came in at 8.15%. So our daily positivity rate in the state is extremely high. And actually, it was 7.32%. At our surge, our last peak in April and May, the max positivity rate that we ever reached in the state was 8.15%. So you can see we're nearing where we were at the surge, our first surge. So the total number of cases in the state right now is 232,000 thereabouts, and the number of fatalities in the state is 10,824 deaths to date. We have watched the positivity rate from August go from its lowest being 0.8% to, again, today going set to 7.32%. And every single month it's been, our county and local health data has been on the same congruent path as the state. So those are kind of the trends, the data that I give to our EMT team twice a week. Now, a couple of our primary functions in the health department is one, case investigation. So if someone was to become positive, and I know perhaps you all know this, but I'm just going to kind of give you a summary of what it is that we're doing. So if someone were to become positive, the lab has to report it to the State Department of Public Health, and then the State Department of Public Health then triages it and sends the information down through a software system called Maven to the community department that the person resides in. So those are coming into us every single day, all day long. And it's up to us to do the case investigation, get in contact with this person and ask all sorts of questions, ask about symptoms, symptom onset date, test date, to talk about what a direct close contact is, kind of figure out within 48 hours prior to onset or prior to test date who those contacts are. And then we start our contact tracing. So we have our case investigation with the index case, and then we do all the contact tracing and investigation with all the direct contacts. And I have a team of contact tracers that help us with that. We're onboarding a couple more. We had let a lot go during the summer because we could handle this internally, but with the surge of cases, it's a lot to handle. And the cases have changed a lot. The cases were way more simple in April and May because people were kind of shut in at that point. We really weren't going out. The contacts, the number of contacts, I think the average was 3.5, and they were about 95% of them were their household members, where now the cases are extremely complex and people's worlds have gotten a little bit bigger, and they're going to grocery stores and they're getting their hair done and they're going to the gym. So trying to identify close contacts is a very cumbersome and laborious job. So that's what we do with our cases. The other thing that I'm doing, which I mentioned, is I am watching data trends. I'm watching them globally, nationally, in the state, countywide. I'm looking at, granular data, and this is helping me set policies. So to date, I've probably set over 20 local orders, anywhere from suspending high contact sports, which was a recent one, businesses having to report to the health department within 12 hours of notification of a positive employee. Health screenings are being implemented that we are writing versus what the businesses have been using in the past, because we have the most current up-to-date information. We've done gathering orders, venue orders, mask orders, tag sales, landscaping, construction, farmers market, the list goes on. I'm taking the data, and that's what's driving policy and recommendations that we make. So that's kind of the core of what we're doing in the health department, what's taking up a lot of our time and our space. But additionally, we've hired and I want to say, 8 or 9 public health ambassadors back in late summer, early fall, to kind of have a presence in the community. Our primary job was getting out masks. We had taken on that responsibility very early on. I want to say probably April, and getting our hands on whatever masks. Not that time, they're all homemade because you couldn't purchase any at that time, and giving them out to people who didn't have them. And we just kind of adopted that and kept with that initiative. And we, in the summer, hired public health ambassadors to kind of take that on for us. And they would go out in the community, set up tables, and not only provide masks, but also provide really good public health information and resources to those who might want it, or let people know, we were one of the first communities to have a mask mandate in our downtown, to let people know, if they hadn't seen the signs, that this is what Northampton is, and or we had a mask-free zone. So that was kind of their primary responsibility early on. And I want to date, we've given out over 5,000 masks. So it's been a huge undertaking. They also go to events. So if we find out that someone's having an event, in the paper or on social media, we try to have a presence there. And it's not really about enforcement. It's really about education. And just to let people know that, we're on the same team here. And if you have any questions, if you need any resources, we're here for you. They hand out cards, and they said, if we can't provide you the accurate information that you're looking for today, here's who we'll connect you with. So they've been very awesome at that. And they will stay with us until the end of December. So that's an initiative we also are doing. One of the other things that I follow pretty closely is what's happening with our hospitals here in the state and locally. I look at capacity and I watch that. Currently, the capacity, I want to, end of October, mid-October, we saw our hospital capacity decreasing quite significantly into November. So the state of Massachusetts opened up their surge hospitals again, increasing capacity. So right now, just to kind of put that in context to you, what that looks like, currently today we have 1,325 or so inpatients, COVID inpatients, and we have about 261 people in ICU. That's across the state of Massachusetts. And then what I do is I take that and then I look at, okay, so that means overall, I can say safely, we have about 24% COVID beds, just regular COVID beds open, which equates to about, I don't even know what that equates to, maybe 3,400 or so availability of COVID beds left in the state of Massachusetts. And we have about about 900 ICU beds left. So I look at that at state, and then I kind of compare it to what's happening in Western Massachusetts and our capacity. So let's put it into percentage. So COVID availability beds is about 24% in the state, and then ICU beds is about 39% right now. Then I look to see what's happening in Massachusetts. Right now, we have about 38% availability of COVID inpatient beds and about 67% of ICU beds. And then during my report to our emergency management team, I'll let them know what's happening at Cooley Dickinson Hospital, what their current census is, and then I'll kind of give them just a brief overview what's happening at Bay State and a few other of our larger regional hospitals, just so we can kind of put that in context and all be on the same page. Recently, we have been working with ServiceNet and First Churches to get a shelter open, and I'm happy to report that tomorrow at 4 p.m. those doors will be open. It's not going to be at full capacity. We're going to be staggering people in. ServiceNet still has to hire a few more staff until we can get to full capacity. I had an update this afternoon, and it looks like we're going to be able to house 37 residents in there, which is great. But we're talking about, all the residents are, I think 20 are going to go in tomorrow. They've all gotten tested this week. They know about the expectations. ServiceNet has been great. They've been working with the residents at the cot shelter to move them over. There's about 10 residents there. Then they'll have 10 more vacant beds for tomorrow. And then as they increase or ramp up their staff, they will they'll get more residents in. So we've been working on that. Another big piece of my job is kind of acting as an advisor to the schools, the superintendent and these small little committees that he has me on. We talk about best practices, mitigating strategies. Once a week, I have to make a recommendation on whether or not the schools should remain open, move forward with the hybrid, or pause. And again, I'm able to give them this really granular data on what's happening in the schools and what's happening out in the community. Now, that state data that I mentioned before, it can be a little misleading. So they have these metrics that are set, and you might have all heard of them. They are gray, and then it's a stoplight, right? It's green, yellow, and red, and they all have parameters set around them. If you have this many people, you're in the green, and if you have this positivity rate, it's a combination. And then if you go over, you're into the next color. What's really tricky about using this state data and this state metrics is there can be duplicates in the surveillance system, meaning they've put in there the same person 2 or 3 times. Or in this case, what happened from Sunday morning to actually again this morning, I've had 12 cases that have been given to Northampton, identified as Northampton cases, but in fact, these people don't live in Northampton. They live in Pittsfield, Amherst, and Holyoke. But when the state does their data pull, if those cases are in our queue, they're included in that count and then could put us over from that yellow threshold into the red. So, I mean, this is kind of a decent baseline, but if you really want to know what's happening in Northampton, I'm the best resource for that. And that's why I meet with this committee the schools weekly to really give them a sense of what's going on. And I talk with our other health directors in the county on a very regular basis. And I tend to kind of have a pulse on what's going on in their community and their schools. So it's very helpful, especially considering that there's an MOA that if other communities are in this red zone, decisions are made off of that. So anyways, besides that, I've been talking to the mayor a little bit about possibly standing up a testing site. It's a very small scale, once a week test site. Testing right now is extremely bottlenecked. The restrictions are closing in on us again. Partially due to the increased travel. A lot of people wanted to get tests before they traveled for the Thanksgiving holiday, but also because the rates are going up. We've got more sick people that need to get tested because they're symptomatic and their household members. We're finding that it can take 2 or 3 days to get an appointment for people to get in to get tested. Therefore, their guard is down. They might be out in the public when, if in actuality they are COVID positive, they should be at home in isolation. So we're working on that. And if all goes forward, we're hoping next week we'll have our first day open. And again, it'll be small scale, but it'll help to support what's happening, the testing that's happening in our community, in our county. Unfortunately, as much as I had advocated this almost daily to the state COVID command team, asking for a Stop the Spread site here in Hampshire County, we have never gotten one. So there's a huge gap in Hampshire County when it comes to testing. I've also been talking to UMass about possibly opening up to do a little more community asymptomatic testing. So it's something that I'm always thinking about. I think it's very unfortunate that we're 9 months into this pandemic and we're facing this again. I thought we would have had this figured out by now. And then lastly, what's on everybody's mind is vaccination. We are starting to look at our EDS plans and really starting to think strategically when vaccines come to the local level, which I just submitted my paperwork because we have been identified as being on par to getting vaccines, COVID vaccines, because we are a registered vaccination site through the state already. So we're one of the local communities that will be given vaccines. So I just sent in our paperwork today to get approval. So we're anticipating maybe March at the earliest for local communities to get vaccinations. But once we get vaccinations, we're going to want to do mass vaccinations for our communities. So we're reviewing our EDS sites. We actually did a drive-through clinic on Halloween where we did, I think, about 450 flu vaccines. So we actually exercised one of our plans, our EDS plans at Smith Voc, and it was beautiful. The only thing is the weather. It was one of the coldest days we've had so far. We were freezing out there. The vaccinators' hands were frozen solid. So we have to think about that too. It can be quite chilly in March and April. So that's kind of just an overview of what we've been doing. I'm sorry if it was long-winded. I just wanted to give you a little more complete than just a snapshot of what the health department is doing.
Thank you so much for all of that information. Mayor Narkowicz, is there anything you wanted to add before I see if there are any questions?
No, I think you can definitely go to questions.
Okay. Counselors, do you have any questions for Director O'Leary? See Counselor Nash. Hey, Laura, could you make me the host so that I could make the counselors co-hosts? Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Counselor Nash.
Thank you. So Meredith, you mentioned vaccinations would be available, I think, in early March. That's for the general public. I'm wondering, in terms of our public health, people working in hospitals, are they going to be getting vaccinated earlier?
So the state hasn't released the final plan yet. But in phase 1 and phase 2, it's our hopes that the healthcare workers that are in the COVID facing departments in the hospitals will be part of, we're calling it phase 1A for vaccine, and also our first responders and long-term health people in the long-term healthcare facilities. They're saying phase 3 is when local health departments can anticipate getting vaccines. So it's going to be very scripted on who's going to get vaccines. I do know that Chief Davin was notified by Cooley Dickinson Hospital that it's their intention around the 15th of December or so to have vaccinations available for the first responders and to kind of get a count of your personnel that's going to want them. So fingers crossed.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Quinlan, then Councillor Labarge.
Thank you so much for this presentation. This was a lot to take in, but really well worth it. I did have a couple of questions. One was, you mentioned that you had been advocating for Hampshire County or Northampton maybe to be like a mini testing site. Do you have a location picked out for that if it were to be in Northampton?
So it's not going to be a set location and it's not going to be open to the general public. It's going to be very scripted on who can get testing. You know, one thing that I'm seeing a lot of right now is a lot of transmission happening in our businesses. And if we're going to have these essential operations remaining open, I feel like doing asymptomatic testing for our restaurants or our grocery store workers. So it's going to be very targeted on who gets testing. Maybe one day will be spent doing testing on daycare providers and teachers. And so we can take this unit and go around to several places. So it's not going to be, it makes it a little more complicated, you know, than just having one site. But I think being strategic and mindful on how we do this and showing the state a very good model will benefit us in the end.
Well, I appreciate that. That's, I mean, just separately, Northampton Policing Review Commission, we were talking about having 3 hearings, and if we were doing them in person, having them in different locations around the city to get to more people. I think that's a great idea. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you're the best resource for information for our place here. And I wondered, when you meet with the school department, you know, do you create a report, and how do we access that information easily? Is there a way that we can have access to a weekly report that you make or anything like that for our residents?
So I don't make a weekly report for the school department. I do put up 2 to 3 times a week, a graph indicating where we are for cases. And I separate it by community cases, long-term healthcare facility cases, and then the overall. And that's on our Northampton.gov COVID page. So that's always updated. This is a committee that I've been asked to be on. Before it was subject to OML, so I'm sure there was agendas and minutes, which I didn't keep, someone else did on the school department side. But this new advisory group to the superintendent, it's just an advisory group, it's not a committee, so I don't think anyone's really taking scripted notes.
Okay. And then lastly, when you came to City Services back in March, and then again, since then, we had a discussion about, and you said there was still a need for people to join the Medical Reserve Corps. Are you still in need of people to get involved with that?
Oh, yes, most definitely. When it comes time to mass vaccination, we are going to need a lot of volunteers to help this happen. The Medical Reserve Corps that we run out of Northampton is county-wide, and there's going to be a lot of communities doing the same thing. So it's going to be my coordinator to kind of flush that out. So anyone, you know, you don't have to have a medical background. Anyone who wants to volunteer, please go to, I don't even know the website anymore. Contact me at the health department, and we'll give you the information to how to sign up to volunteer.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, Councilor Labarge, you were next.
Thank you. Meredith, how many ambassadors do you have working?
Right now I have 7, and they work up to anywhere between like 15 and up to 20 hours a week.
And my question is, how come it ends in December?
Because we're using CARES Act funding to pay the salary of the ambassadors, and the CARES Act funding ends December 30th.
And what happens if we have a problem with the COVID and we're right back to, which I hope we're not, into a problem again?
Mhm.
How would your department be able to function?
Yeah, certainly. I can appreciate that. So, the primary goal of the ambassadors is information, being out in the community in Florence and Northampton. I have, in addition to that, I have hired a full-time COVID compliance officer, and he's been supported, his salary's been supported by the CARES Act up to now, but we're going to have to absorb that cost after January 1st. We've received, over 2,500 complaints so far since the summer. And a lot of my inspector's time and the COVID compliance officer's time is spent addressing these complaints. Now, mind you, probably close to 80% of them were mask complaints, people protesting not wearing masks, or someone was driving downtown and someone, saw someone not wearing a mask. Those types of things we couldn't address, but mask complaints, certainly inside of businesses, we addressed all the time. But so we will need to continue to keep the COVID compliance officer on the budget come January 1st. And if things ramp up to such a level again, then I would ask the mayor for extra support, and we would have to figure out a funding mechanism for that.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Now, reading in the Gazette, and I know you work along with the Board of Health with East Hampton and wherever, and it's stated now that the mayor there has now closing down the schools until March. Is there an uptick going on in East Hampton?
Well, they're trending just like everyone else is trending. Their numbers, based off their population, are significantly higher than what we were seeing here in Northampton. And I think it was just a decision based off community transmission, widespread community transmission, where I look at that, but I additionally look at what's happening in the schools. That's what's really important, right? Do we have transmission happening in the schools?
Right.
And we haven't had that. We have been, we have really good public health strategies in place. It's all about the mask wearing, 6 feet apart. If you're sick, stay home. They do health screenings every single day. And then it's about if there's even a possibility that someone is sick and we might think it's COVID, we start with our containment efforts, right? Because we don't want it to spread. So we will cohort certain people, get them out of there until we know differently. So we're really conservative, again, because we don't want community transmission to happen in the schools. That could be a detriment. We want the kiddos in school, in learning. The best thing we can do for them.
What I'd like to know, Meredith, you mentioned about the percentage right now in Northampton. What was that percentage?
Let me go back to my notes, Counselor. Our positivity rate,
Yes.
1.15%.
And where are we standing right now with the COVID-19 in the city of Northampton? I mean, where's our level? I mean, are we up or medium or what?
Oh, no, we're up. No, we're up. We've seen 146 cases over the last 3 months. 114 of them were in Northampton. So we're definitely up.
Now, from ServiceNet, you're talking about, they're fantastic, and they are. How they've been very supportive with the city, working with the mayor, working with the Board of Health, and whoever. My question is, are they going into like motels to take some of them to be able to have shelter and so forth like that? And are they COVID?
Mayor?
I mean, if you want me to try to, you can go ahead, or I can take a stab at that too, Meredith, whatever you want to do.
I thought you were raising your hand. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Meredith.
Okay. So right now, what we're going to have is we're going to have Grove Street, and I think we have 15 people at Grove Street, And then we're going to have our 38 or 39 at First Churches, which is congregate setting. And then what happens if someone were to screen in that they were sick, you know, because they're going to do health screenings twice a day, or that they had known contact with someone who was COVID positive or tested positive, because we will have intermittent testing. You have to test negative to get into the shelter, and then we'll probably do testing every other week while the shelter is open. If you were to test positive, okay, so any one of those scenarios, you would go to an isolation and recovery center, which is run by MEMA. And currently there is one out east, and then one is opening up, I believe, next Wednesday in Pittsfield, Mayor?
Mhm.
Yes, Pittsfield. So they'll go to a hotel until their isolation or their quarantine period ends. And I'm hoping that we get an isolation recovery center here again in Hampshire County. I think there's conversations happening. Mayor Narcoitz has been a huge advocate and strong support of that, and talking to the legislators and the senators. And
Didn't we have it on Con Street also, just strictly for the COVID?
we did. We had it at the Quality Inn, but it was underutilized. And I think MEMA, you know, perhaps maybe saw the finances to what it took financially to support the shelter versus how much it actually got used. I don't know why it's not there now, but that's what I'm assuming.
Well, Meredith, I want to thank you very, very much, and your ambassadors and your employees for working very, very tirelessly. This has not been easy for you and your department and your employees, and also for our mayor too. So thank you both.
Thank you, Counselor.
Okay, Counselor Maori, then Counselor Foster.
Hi, I'm so glad to have this update. Thank you so much. I know you've been working for a long time on this. I just have a couple of questions. Curiosity about the ambassadorships. How did that work out? Did you feel that was, did they report kind of that they felt it was going well, and that they're being received and kind of listened to? And
So it's funny that you asked that. When we first, were boots on the ground out in the public, it was more about, asking people to do the right thing. And we encountered confrontations, and the ambassadors weren't trained on de-escalation tactics or even how to, simmer down any type of confrontation. So we changed our tactic really quickly, because I didn't want to put my ambassadors in that position. And so we just wanted to be there as a resource. I feel in the early months of the program, my ambassadors were utilized a lot more than they are now. Because there were things happening outside, small scale events happening outside, and we were sure to be there. More people just walking around downtown. But now that it's gotten colder, there's really not a lot of interactions happening between the general public and the ambassadors. I did offer to the schools, now that we're going into hybrid, we started hybrid last Monday. We're going into the second phase of hybrid, which started today, that if they need my ambassadors to help with health screenings in the morning, or just to have a presence in the school, another set of eyes to help with, identifying things that we could maybe do a little better, that they're available to them. So if they need help with bus monitoring, anything like that. So they've definitely been, they've had a great impact on our community, the work that they've been doing. I think overall it's been a successful initiative. And if we're still in the same position, which I'm hoping not, in the spring, we might have to bring them back. Mm-hmm.
thank you. That's interesting and kind of hopeful. I like the model of that. It's really innovative. I guess the other thing I want, just for anyone listening, kind of like for the average Northampton resident going into the holidays, I know we've read the Baker's words on the holidays and also at the federal level as well. But I guess I'm getting questions from constituents like, where can I get tested? I don't think I've been exposed. I'm asymptomatic, but I really want to go outside and see the grandparents. And So I guess I would just say, yeah, Meredith, if you could just kind of touch upon like general advice for residents about getting tested when they, when they're asymptomatic and don't, and also looking at the holidays.
Sure. So mass.gov, if you go onto mass.gov and go to testing, they have an interactive map there and it identifies every test site, and you can put in your zip code to kind of narrow down the search, hover over the test site, and it'll tell you the parameters, the hours that it's open, the location, if you need a doctor's order, if you have to be symptomatic. So it's a very easy navigatable website to find out where to get tested. Again, asymptomatic testing is going to probably be reduced significantly because we need to save the test for the people who are sick and who are direct close contacts. As for the holidays, all I can say is, in my opinion, the worst days are coming upon us. December through the end of January are going to be extremely difficult times. And I urge everyone to do your part. And that includes, if you have to go out, wear your masks, stay 6 feet apart from everyone. No indoor gatherings outside of your household members. I know that is really tough around the holiday season, but it's important. We need to do this together. Stay home when you're sick, get tested, connect with your PCP, and adhere to public health guidelines. If you've been asked to quarantine, make sure you quarantine to the date that you're supposed to, and the same with isolation. As we move forward during these dark days, it's really important that we have really good public health communication out there, and that we get people, our constituents, to have confidence in our leadership. That's totally important. And we need to work together to shoulder the sacrifices that we're all going to be making. And I'm sad too that I don't get to see my 3 grown kids, but we need to do this together to get on the other side.
Right. Okay. This is helpful because I'm getting kind of like people making informal plans in terms of, I'm just going to kind of quarantine, get a bunch of groceries and quarantine for, 8 days before I go see grandma. And then I'm going to try to go to CVS and get tested and then quarantine. And it seems like there a few folks are kind of trying to make a plan and not really following exactly the guidelines. So that's why I wanted to hear your clarification on that.
Mm-hmm.
That no amount of quarantining will mitigate the risk of indoor gatherings. Is that correct?
If someone was desperate to see their, one of their family members, if you absolutely go nowhere, see no one for 14 days, and everyone that's going to get together at that gathering does the same exact thing and then gets in their cars and goes there, that's about the safest way you can do it. I do not believe in getting a test, getting one negative test, and then going to see family members. That is just one snapshot in time. It is really not reflective of where you're going to be 5 days later or 3 days later. It's one snapshot.
Right. I actually personally thought about that scenario, but then I thought about even on the hour-and-a-half drive, the grandparent is sitting outside in quarantine for 14 days. One kid says they have to use the bathroom and they were in a convenience store, and we're starting all over again. So I think really it is best if folks kind of don't make those plans. But I'm getting inquiries about that, so I really appreciate it. Thank you, Director.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Foster and then Councillor Labarge. I see you. I'll come back to you when other councillors have spoken. I see Councillor Dwight as well.
Thank you, Councillor Shara. And Meredith, thank you so much for being here and for this really comprehensive update. I find it really helpful. I have 4 questions for you. I wanted to start with your description of having strong public health communications. I just wanted to talk to you more about that because the way you're speaking tonight feels like a message that's really valuable to get out to the community. So first I wanted to offer if there's a way we could be helpful in getting that message out, but I was also curious what other tools and it's difficult, right? Because you can message in so many different ways and to see if people are receiving that message. But what plans you have for kind of speaking to this level for the community?
Absolutely. So it's been very challenging to have real good communication with the public. early on in COVID, you know, twice a week, I held COVID Q&As, and it was usually sector specific. You could dial in, and then when the sectors got up and operable and comfortable with what they're doing, then I just opened up to the general public. And we did that, you know, probably until June or so, and then transmission rates went down. The calls really weren't well attended, so we just dropped them off. Well, my second public health nurse that I just hired, her name is Kate Kelly. Happy to have her. She started this past Monday, today's Thursday, this past Monday, the 30th. And we just had a conversation today. And I said, one of my priorities is to have more public facing interaction. And I want to work on this together. And one thing I'd like to do, which I told her, is I'd like to perhaps once a week or once every other week alternate. I'd like to put something out in the Gazette, op-ed or editorial one week, and then the following week do a panel, perhaps, you know, with my public health nurse, myself, and maybe the mayor, which I haven't approached him yet, to do something a little publicly where people could come in, the general public, to a Zoom meeting, and we could put some information out about what it is we're doing, what we're seeing, trends we're seeing, so on and so forth, but actually allow for time for questions to be asked of us too, to help quell, you know, whatever fears or thoughts they might have. So that's on my to-do list, to be more interactive in the public.
Thank you. That's really helpful to hear. I can only imagine the length of your to-do list. And I think that's a really important one to have on it. So thank you. That's really helpful. Another question I had for you is I had asked you about this way back in the spring, but I was wondering what your position is on sewage testing, if you think that that's a valuable strategy to pursue, or if that's something you're looking into at this point.
So we just started doing sewage testing with a company called BioBot, and I think we're probably into our third or fourth week of it. I'm not sure of the value yet. I think if we look at it over time, the trend of what's happening, and compare it to our data to see if they match up, maybe there'll be some value there. What the sewage rate is supposed to tell us when the report comes out, that based off this one sampling, next week we can anticipate seeing X amount of people in our community being COVID positive. But we've got a few factors here that feed into it. A, Williamsburg sewage comes into it. B, we've got the hospital feeding into it. So I'm not positive of the value yet. I look at it, I compare it to our local data, but I'm not putting anything out from it. I think it's great if you can do it at a residential site. So maybe one of your long-term healthcare facilities, take the sample right from that site, because it'll show the presence of COVID. That's what it is. Is COVID there? Is COVID not there? And based on how much of this, the virus particles are present, will kind of give you that number on what you're looking at the number of people that might have it. So if you can capture that, it will let you know, well, okay, COVID is present now, it's here. So if you have a control plan, do some testing and see if you can capture any asymptomatic people. That would be a huge value of sewage testing. There is, like, UVA does it at their residential dorms, and it captures a lot of asymptomatic. You have to have a response to finding the presence thereof, but it's been working really well. I've been following their research on it. So something like that, totally beneficial, but just this broadcast sampling, I'm not sure of the value yet.
That's helpful. So am I understanding it correctly? It just sort of tells you yes or no, but not a concentration, or? It
gives us a concentration.
Okay.
So that's what we're plotting, looking at the trends and trying to match that up with how many, you know, if it's a 1 week, it's one sample for a 1 week time. And then we plot how many cases we have that week to try to match it up to see if it's kind of on par with what we're seing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then just two more questions for you. One's a quick one. You were talking about the MEMA shelter in Pittsfield for folks who test positive who need a place to isolate. And I was wondering if there were plans in the works for healthcare workers. I believe we saw that there was a need in the spring, but if there were healthcare workers who needed to isolate due to exposure who weren't able to isolate at home, if there was any plans or options available for them in Northampton.
So I think Smith College opened up some of their residential dorms to healthcare workers last season. Mayor Narkowitz, do you have you had any conversations with them about doing this again? I haven't had any conversations. I haven't even thought about it, to be honest.
Yeah, those were conversations that happened directly, Cooley Dickinson and Smith College. So I know that those happened and they had some agreements in place. So I would assume if they have a similar surge that they would avail themselves the same way. Obviously, Smith College has now made its announcements about its opening. So it's going to have its own isolation and quarantine housing as well. So I'm sure that's something that President Markesy and her team are working on with Smith and other hotels in the area, et cetera, that may provide that type of housing. Obviously, the city doesn't have any facilities that it could provide for that, but I know that that's part of the active contingency planning that that's been part of Cooley's work all the way back since the beginning.
Thank you. And then just the last question, you were talking about the data that you're looking at and how you're using that to inform the decisions you make. And I was wondering if you could just talk briefly about the decision to pause sports when you did what you were seeing in the data. If you could just sort of do the 300, the high altitude view on that decision.
Yeah, sure. So we had made connections locally in Northampton of kids' youth sports and contacts. And it wasn't so much, we couldn't make the connection that it was happening on the field. Let's take soccer, for example. We often made the connection it was when the kids were on the sidelines or the social gatherings, after, but it was happening during the event, we'll call it whatever, the entire event. So those connections were made. And then at the same point, the state data had showed that that sports and activities of medium to high contact were the #1 activity in terms of transmission that was happening, more than dining, more than shopping. So I was looking at the state data too. And then of course what happened with hockey. And again, it wasn't more so what was happening on the ice, it was what's happening on the bench where there was transmission. So having the city of Northampton, in addition to the state data, really kind of led that decision. What I didn't want to see when that decision was made, we were still really doing extremely well here in Northampton. We were on that green spectrum, we were on the low end of the green, and we were talking about getting our hybrid model up and running. And then we had all of these communities that were in the yellow going into the red, many in the red. And I didn't want a chance, our kiddos playing against these other community teams that were in the red and having transmission and blowing the school up, My priority is those kiddos in school, and anything that I can help, policy wise to help move that forward, I'm always thinking about.
Okay, so I saw there was Councilor Dwight, and then I have a couple questions, and then we'll go back around to anyone who's already asked questions. Councilor Dwight.
Thank you. Meredith, I derive enormous comfort from your vigilance and the mayor and the courage you've both displayed with decisive actions. And I think it's reflected in the fact that actually, given all the variables that Northampton has, in some cases, more challenges than other communities that are more homogenous in the way they're structured, you have a lot of things to consider and calculate, and I have to say it's breathtaking how well you've done. And the proofs, well, in the proofs in the pudding. And so good on you both. The question I have is, I'm concerned about seniors who are living at home, isolated and alone, who now in, a 9-month gestation period, but a significant portion of people's lives now, they've been, and with the ebb and flow, we've seen, culturally, we've seen people adapt to masks, but at the same time, as you pointed out, they started to develop a certain comfort with the circumstances and took chances that they weren't taking in March and April. And I'm particularly concerned how that impacts the seniors who live in their homes alone, whose basically their only contact are groups who might deliver food or services. And they don't have access to Zoom, for instance. They don't have access to the information systems that were available to us. And is there a way, well, one, I assume that you guys have considered that population, but what are the ways that you're how are you able to get the notion across to them that, for instance, a holiday gathering, while it might be extremely desirable for many of them, the one opportunity they get to see their family in a year, that what it means is not only a risk to them, but to all people consequential to them?
Yeah, that's really a tough one. And unfortunately, I've, during my investigations, but communications with people who have been sick or close contact, many of them seniors, I've heard from so many, which is heartbreaking to me, that they were willing to take the risk to see their family, that they were going to die of loneliness, and they balanced it out and they made the choice, which is very unfortunate. I feel like with vaccines, like so tangible, right? We can almost reach it. Like my message is just going to say, hold on, we'll get you there. Let's just get through this. I know it can be extremely lonely, but we want you to, we want you to be here, January. Please don't take the risk. Marie Desmond, is that her last name? Senior Center Director, is actually working on a program on helping seniors with technology. She's doing one-on-one at the senior center, bringing people in, and we have very strict COVID protocols on teaching seniors how to learn to use devices, technology. So hopefully that can get people, get seniors connected to their family members and get them on a Zoom call or what have you. So it is heartbreaking. Marie's really good, and her team, about thinking about connections and doing things on a very small scale. Again, these are our most high risk, community members, and we haven't taken a lot of chances with them whatsoever. The senior center was the first thing that we closed down. It'll be the last thing that we open up until we have herd immunity, which is, that we're saying based off the R-naught factor is about 65% people need to be immunized either through, cellular immunity and vaccination. So it's going to take a while to get there, but just hold on, we're on our way.
I would just add to that, just to build on that. Definitely, the senior center has been focused on. They have a list of seniors that they call on a regular basis that they know are alone and don't have family. And Meredith is right. The technology is not only a training program, but it's actually a technology lending program. So they're actually setting up seniors who don't have technology, including hotspots if they don't have Wi-Fi or internet. And as she described, we have a process where they can come to the senior center, not only pick up the device, but get a training on the device so they know how to actually use it and boot it up. And they've been doing a lot of classes, yoga and other things, as well as just having just an opportunity to talk with other seniors, among other seniors, obviously, albeit in a Zoom environment. But that's sort of what they've been working on to try to do, as well as a transportation program to try to get people to appointments safely. So that's one of the things that's happening in the senior arena, but they're definitely our most at-risk population. And I, like our children who've been, the trade-offs of isolation and not being with their friends and having socialization. Similarly for seniors, it's a similar health risk for them as well.
Are there other counselors who haven't yet spoken with questions? Oh, Counselor Thorpe.
Thank you. And thank you, Meredith, for being here and for your presentation. I'm not sure if you have an answer for my question, but I'm asking anyway. What preparation will be involved for receiving the vaccine when it's available? I mean, you hear so much nowadays that it needs to be, one vaccine needs to be stored at 20 below zero. Another one needs to be stored at 70 below zero. Another one is room temperature. What preparation is involved for receiving the vaccine?
Sure, yeah. So the vaccine that has to be kept at 70 below zero, those are going to go to the large hospitals that have the equipment already to store at that temperature. So we won't see that at a local level. We do have vaccination refrigeration. I don't know if it's going to be needed, depending on what vaccine we get. It's so hard to answer that question. It's really dependent on which vaccine we're going to get. We have plans, we have MOUs with companies in regards to equipment. Like, we have all this pre-planning done, but it's really hard to tell you what I'm going to need to mobilize until I know what we're going to get.
Thank you for that. At least I know what you're going to do with the 70, where the 70 below zero goes.
Yeah, we won't be housing that one.
I have a couple of questions. Director O'Leary, could kind of piggybacking on Councillor Foster's question about sewage testing, you said that it's really effective more in like a residential setting. Is there any way that we could do that kind of testing, say somewhere like Linda Manor, or is the way that our solid waste system works, it's just not possible?
I don't think it's possible. And I don't speak effluent really well. But when Donna Lascalia, who is the superintendent for the DPW, approached me on this, that was my first question. Could we do it in these facilities? And she gave me all of the reasons why we couldn't. So there is a reason, I just don't know why.
Okay, fair enough. My next question is a little bit later on our agenda. We have an application for fireworks for First Night. And, First Night is being planned so that, people are enjoying it from their own homes. But as we know, people have a need to congregate anyway. Are there any plans, and hearing that the ambassadors are leaving on December 30th, have you had any conversations about how to sort of mitigate people who are gonna end up downtown on First Night, whether for the ball or for fireworks or just because that's what we do on First Night, and how we can sort of mitigate those risks or do education or enforcement or.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't thought about First Night. My bandwidth is about 6 hours ahead. That's how I roll. My number one message, I kind of can give you the next chapter of what our numbers are going to look like in January. And I can firmly tell you right now, my message is going to be to stay home and not come out and not congregate. Like, that's going to be the number one most important public health message. And then we'll talk about other public health strategies if you do plan on coming out, and just kind of reiterating that. With any type of public health message, I fear that it just becomes background noise after a while. So, I want to think strategically about, instead of stay 6 feet away and wear your mask, reframing that for the holiday season and including that in First Night.
I do want to say there isn't going to be a ball raising this year. It's going to be pre-recorded, and it's going to be a virtual. So there isn't going to be a ball raising on King Street. It's like the rest of the concerts and other events, they're going to be either streamed or pre-recorded, sort of like a la Transperformance was this year. The only thing that's happening sort of live outdoors is the fireworks being shot off the parking garage. And I believe the thought was that, I mean, there may not be as many people downtown anyway because of the venues, but that there's enough place to spread out to be able to see them from all over downtown. So I think that was the theory of still having the fireworks early in the evening.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Councilor Labarge and then Councilor Maori.
Councilor Shara, you answered what I wanted to know about the fireworks. And are people going to be able to come down Main Street? Because some people have been calling me about that. And also the mayor just answered what I wanted to know about the raising of the ball too. Thank
Okay.
you.
Welcome, Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I just had a question from a constituent actually about if you control our COVID positive rate in Northampton for higher ed facilities and what kind of impact is higher education having on our COVID positive rate in Northampton?
Oh, certainly. So so the positivity rate for Massachusetts, you can look at it in two different ways. You can look at the total number, which includes higher education, but then there's another, on that graph, another line that extrapolates higher ed, and you can see what's actually happening. Because with higher ed, you have people getting tested over and over and over again, and it will skew our actual positivity rate. In Northampton, I haven't extrapolated what Smith College is doing. They really, I mean, they only have a small subset of students there and faculty there. So I don't think it would have a significant impact on our positivity rate. I really haven't looked at it closely enough. Whereas if it was UMass who's doing a lot of testing, it would definitely skew the positivity rate, meaning that the number would look a lot better than what it actually is, because there's so many tests being done on repeat people.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, and then we have folks from UMass coming into Northampton. It's kind of hard to control for visitors, I suppose. So, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilors, any other questions for Director O'Leary? I don't see any. So Director O'Leary, as Councilor Dwight said, thank you so much. Your tireless leadership through all of this has truly been very comforting, and we can't thank you for all the work that you and your department have done. And actually, I just wanted to take a moment to publicly thank your public health nurse, Jenny Meyer, who's leaving, who I've really enjoyed working with. I've always appreciated her approach and her forthrightness, and she'll be very, very missed. And we wish her all the best. So if you could please share that with her. And to welcome Kate Kelly, who actually I also know and am really thrilled that she's coming on board. So thank you to you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and for all the work you're doing. And as Councilor Foster said, if we can be helpful in any way, please never hesitate to contact us and use us in that way, okay?
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me here tonight and letting me occupy your last hour. So anytime you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly too. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation or answer emails. All right.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
Talk to you tomorrow morning.
You got it.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Next up, we are gonna have that vote to consider and then vote on the request to reduce the 120 notification period for that Omasta APR to 60 days. That I read the read into the record earlier. And so this is a, the state has that 120-day period. They are asking us to reduce that to 60 days for them. And we need to vote on that.
So you need a motion to that effect. So I move that we approve reducing the waiting period by half, right? Is that by half?
Yeah, 60 days.
120 to
Yeah.
I'll second
Yep.
that.
To 60 days. Yeah.
The motion has been made by Councilor Dwight and seconded by Councilor Labarge. Is there any discussion on this? Oh boy. Okay, Councilor Dwight.
I would like some explanation. That's all. I mean, I made the motion for purposes of the discussion. So if someone could break down why we need to expedite this.
Okay, I'm going to ask Laura. Laura had some interactions. Unless Mayor Narkowitz, if you have information on this. You're talking, but I can't hear you.
Laura has investigated it, so she
Okay.
can give you.
Laura had worked with Clerk Powers on this, and so Laura's probably the one who knows the most.
I just know that we received the request from the Commonwealth, and Clerk Powers did let them know that it would need to have 2 readings. I don't really know the reason behind the request for reducing the notification period.
Well, I would suspect it has more to do with the fact that I think as a body, we are unique in the state by requiring 2 votes, 2 readings, as it were, on a particular vote. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
Actually think that that's it. There wasn't a lot of explanation as to why they needed
The
to
state.
wait the time.
State just said, do this. Okay.
Yeah,
All
what
right.
we
This is a matter that's come before the council prior to, you may recall that you did have an order that authorized the mayor to grant, a conservation restriction or an APR, or so you did take up this matter regarding the Omastas and their land. And so it has come before you before. And I think that it's I think because of the fact that I think they want to move forward and get it executed probably before the end of the year, that there is this mechanism in state law, not only for APRs, but for a number of other sort of public notice requirements where you can ask the governing body to reduce it and waive that full 120-day requirement. So I think that's what this is about. And why the state is asking you to do this. So this wouldn't be the first time that the Omasta property and the preservation restrictions on their farmland has come before the body. So
I quite agree, and I honestly don't see any reason why we should not approve this. It's just because it requires special permission. At least I want some clarity as to why we'd be granting it, and I think I got it. So thank you.
Councilor Jarrett, was your hand raised?
It was a similar question, though I am reading the letter right now, so that describes some of this. So I may have another question in a second.
Okay. Councilor Foster, did you have your hand raised?
I did, thank you. Appreciate it. Mayor, I think your explanation was helpful, and I do know that we've looked at this, and I guess the only question I have, I was still framing it, is with the shorter notification period, is there any party that would stand, is there any potential harm that could come to a party from there being a shortened notification period? Does that question make sense?
yeah, no, and not really that I can think of, because the land is owned by the Omasta family, and this isn't like a right of first refusal or something like that. I mean, they're making a decision to basically forego what would probably be a very lucrative development of land that could easily be, turned into a housing development and taken out of agriculture. So they're making the decision to basically give up the development rights to their property forever to keep it in farmland, And the state is asking, for the opportunity to do that. So again, this is a request not coming from me asking you to expedite this. It's the state. They didn't even contact me about it. They just they sent it to the city clerk and sent it to the council. So, but I don't think that there's anyone out there who would be harmed, or that has some right that's being taken away, because obviously this is the Omastas are making this decision. So it's not like it's being swiped from somebody else, or somebody else was trying to buy it or something like that, and this would somehow thwart that. So I don't see any harm that would happen, unless, just on a policy level, there might be people out there who think we shouldn't preserve farmland, and we should build subdivisions on that land and not preserve agricultural land that's been in families for generations. With cute llamas.
Right. There was 3.
Councillor Labarge and Councillor Jarrett.
Yes. I can see why that they want to go from 120 days to the 60 days. And if you read the consent to the reduction, the mayor has talked just recently now, and he's hit it right on the button. It's to protect this farmland. And I have to be very honest with you, way back as a counselor, I was at the planning board with the Omastas at one time, and they were trying to put that store up, and I think I told you all about that. There were contractors who were actually looking at that property for a development, like the mayor was saying, could happen. They didn't want that. They just wanted to have a store there and be part of the community. Anyways, if you read the consent on 4A, the farmland, right? The classification of this farm is for protection. And I agree with this. And I am going to support the 60 days. And I also feel like they're saying the closing for this project is a time-sensitive matter. So I'm supporting the 60 days. It's beautiful property. The whole area of the Omasta farm is absolutely beautiful. And I thank them for doing what they're doing and preserving that beautiful farmland.
Thank you. Councillor Jarrett, still have your hand?
Yeah, Councillor Labarge actually read exactly what I was about to point out. So I think that's clear now.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on reducing this time period? Okay. Seeing none, roll call please, Laura.
Councillor Dwight,
Yes.
Councillor Foster,
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Maori,
Yes.
Councillor Nash,
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
and Councillor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. And we will go ahead and take a second reading on that in 2 weeks, which will still be within that 60 days. So next we're moving on to the consent agenda. I'll read the titles and then I'll ask if there are any removals for discussion, because there's no discussion on the consent agenda. First item is minutes of November 5th, 2020. And next is 20.152, application for supervised display of fireworks for first night. This is the sponsors of Northampton Arts is Northampton Arts Inc. Location is E. John Gare Parking Garage at 85 Hampton Avenue. And fireworks special effects company is Pyrotechnico Fireworks Inc. The operator is Robert Godowski. And the date of the display is December 31st, 2020 at 6:15 p.m. And the rain date is January 1st, 2021. I assume also at 6:15 p.m. Next is 20.153 petitions for pool table licenses. This is Packard's renewal license for Packard's 14 14 Masonic Street for a Sunday license and a renewal for a weekday license. So that is the consent agenda. Any removals? Councillor Dwight?
Could we remove the fireworks application, please?
Absolutely. Any other removals? Seeing none. Roll call on the consent agenda minus the application for fireworks.
I think we're still waiting for a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
and
I move to approve the consent agenda. I'm sorry.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Jarrett. We are removing the fireworks. Any further discussion? Nope, no discussion. Roll call on the consent agenda except for the fireworks, and then we'll discuss that.
Councillor Foster,
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Maori,
Yes.
Councillor Nash,
Councillor Nash? We can't hear you.
I know.
Yes?
Now we
Yes.
can.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councillor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay. Next, so we're going to go back to the 20.152 application for supervised display of fireworks for first night. Is
Move
there a motion?
approval.
Second.
Move approval.
Motion was made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Labarge. Discussion. Councillor Dwight.
The questions I had, of course, you touched on in the course of the conversation with the director of the Board of Health. So the mayor hopefully can come back. See hiding behind that pink M. There we are. It's the can you break down? I mean, I don't. What precautions are we taking in this circumstance? Because obviously, within the context of the conversation we just had, it seems almost crazy to have an event like this downtown that would simply invite people to gather downtown.
Yeah, I mean, the Arts Council, well, you know, obviously the obvious safety things are they will be working with, you know, the fire department and taking all those kinds of safety precautions. The garage is closed and cordoned off and people can't get close to the garage, so they need to stay far away from the garage before and during and, you know, just until after it happens. We obviously, you know, will be putting out information to people. We'll probably be doing, you know, an informational robocall of some kind relative to, you know, first night. Again, it's a little bit, typically the fireworks are happening right as all of the various first night concert venues are kind of moving from the daytime into the nighttime series, you know, and so there's a crush of people downtown who are, you know, going to the fireworks and then going to go see the Northamptons at the Academy, and they're, you know, are going to the parlor room, and so downtown is, or they're getting dinner, and so I don't see any of that happening because all of the events are online streaming, so there won't be any actual venues that anyone can actually be at. They will be filming the fireworks. You know, TV will be filming and streaming the fireworks as part. So if you're sitting at home to watch first night and to check out sort of the virtual stream of the first night concerts that are happening, some which will be pre-recorded, some which are being filmed live at the 33 Holly Street, similar to Transperformance. The fireworks will be interspersed with it, as will eventually, well, a pre-recorded ball raising that'll happen at midnight if you want to stay up and watch it on Northampton Open Media. So I think it's in that context that they are anticipating that there'll be a lot of people downtown, and that people would be, obviously all of our mask requirements are in effect. It's a relatively short program. You know, the fireworks itself is, you know, 10 to 15 minutes and then it's over. So I think that was the thinking, was to have this one element of first night that's hard to simulate or replicate in a studio, to go ahead with it. And that I believe was the thinking.
I mean, obviously I don't want to be a killjoy, and I don't want to be the guy responsible for the end the fireworks. It just seems, I don't know, it just seems counterindicated given everything else that we just talked about. Is there any way, I mean, what precautions do, say, the police are what, you know, are they going to be able to break up groups? I don't know if you can actually do that. I mean, given the circumstances, it's yeah. I'm prepared to approve the application. I think it's worth noting that it does seem, as I said, counterindicated given the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the only other thing I can say analogous to it is I mean, I know they did like a virtual Boston Pops 4th of July celebration this year. There wasn't, you know, you couldn't actually go to the Esplanade and see it, but obviously the Boston Pops performed and there was fireworks, but nobody could actually go spectate it. So I think that was, but certainly we'll have people downtown. We will not have the same level of staffing that we would normally have on first night, because there's really not going to be the venues. There's not going to be any need to shut down streets because there won't be any ball raising. And yeah, but your point is well taken. Your point is well taken.
Thanks.
Councilor Jarrett.
Thank you. We heard Director O'Leary talk about how she's going to be encouraging people to stay home, most likely, and so that definitely, like Councilor Dwight, I have a similar question, but also understanding that if things do rise, I do have faith that Director O'Leary would perhaps make an order that would cancel it in the circumstances, and so the fact that she, I guess she's not here anymore, but the fact that she hasn't done that is something that we perhaps can trust in.
Most definitely, and I can assure you she would not hesitate to shut it down. So she would definitely, we would shut it down if that were the case. Yeah.
Other comment, Councilor Foster.
Just a point of clarification. I'm sitting with a similar feeling, Councilor Dwight, to what you articulated. And so point of clarification, if we were approving this now, I'm understanding that December 17th, that the next council meeting would be too late, my guess, for the planning and preparations, or is that a possibility to take this up at our next council meeting on the 17th?
So I have many responsibilities in the city. Fireworks is not generally one of them. Usually Penny Burke is here before you traditionally. She's been coming for 20 something years. I'm not quite sure why there isn't anyone from the Arts Council here to talk about it. So I don't know the logistics of the contractual arrangement. But I think the council can do what the council wants to do. So if you want to just take one reading tonight and delay a second reading, so be it. I wish I had more information to give you, other than typically this has happened in the past because there's a contract and all the preparations that have to take place, et cetera. But I think you could certainly, you're actually granting a permit, a fireworks display permit. So that's sort of the background. But I'm, yeah.
And we only do one reading on these.
That's the other issue.
Yeah. Councilor Dwight.
I recall from previous applications that actually the timeline is fairly tight because of the contractual arrangements and agreements. And these things are very expensive to do. So I'm, I'm sympathetic to the applicants, and Councilor Jarrett makes a very good point that we've invested this much faith in Director O'Leary's vigilance, and I'm prepared to do that in this case too. As she said, her bandwidth's fairly narrow. She hasn't looked this far into the future, and I'm sure this is now. She will pay attention to this and make a very judicious and appropriate decision given the circumstances on the ground. And I agree, I believe the mayor would as well. So I have every confidence in both of them, and can feel fairly comfortable in voting for this tonight.
I would agree with that too. Obviously, I'm concerned about it because I asked Director O'Leary about it, and I just hope that it's been considered by those that are entering into this contract, that it if the situation came and it had to be canceled, I don't know what it looks like in terms of that, but I hope that's something that's on their radar, because it's something we're thinking about. So I hope that they've thought about it as well. Okay, any other discussion? Councilor Foster.
I can't imagine there's an event planner on the planet that's not thinking contingencies, and similar, Councilor Dwight, to what you articulated. I'm comfortable voting to approve the application, recognizing that we all know things can change between now and then, or may not, and so that's where I'm lining up as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
and Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, that's been granted. And we are now going to recess for finance. Laura, when you're ready, will you please call the roll of finance?
Sure. Councilor Labarge,
Yes. Here.
Councilor Quinlan,
Here.
Councilor Shara,
Here.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Here.
Okay, our first item is approval of the minutes from November 5th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Quinlan. Any discussion on those minutes? Roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, those have been approved. Next, we have 20.156. Upon the recommendation of the mayor, in order to appropriate free cash $60,000 to the health department for temporary COVID-19 staffing. Whereas funding to address the ongoing costs incurred by the city relative to the COVID-19 pandemic has been made available through the CARES Act. Whereas it's been necessary for the city's health department to add temporary staff to handle the increased workload created by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the cost of the additional staff has been allowed under the CARES Act grant program, which ends December 30th, 2020. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic continues to require significant city resources to respond adequately to the ongoing emergency, and additional staff are needed beyond December 30th, 2020. Whereas, while it is our intention to apply for FEMA reimbursement for the costs related to hiring temporary staff, an additional appropriation from the city's free cash to fund these staff is deemed necessary in the absence of a solid commitment from FEMA to continue this funding. Ordered that $60,000 be appropriated from the FY 2021 General Fund Undesignated Fund Balance free cash to the Health Department PS line 15111511000 to fund the salaries of temporary staff added as part of the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including the COVID compliance officer, an additional public health nurse, and additional hours for the health department assistant.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Thorpe, and I see that we have, Mayor Narkowitz. Did you
Yes. Sure, I'll start off, and if there's questions, we can go from there. Meredith made reference to the fact that the CARES Act expires on December 30th, and this is obviously related to the inability of the Congress to reauthorize any of the previously created COVID-19 programs that not only for businesses, but for states and municipalities, unemployment insurance, all the other things that were agreed to early, but had expiration dates. So the city has been tapping into CARES Act funding for all of the unanticipated eligible expenses related to COVID-19, including especially items in the health department. And while, in the Washington world, everything, I guess, gets solved on December 30th and the COVID-19 goes away, we know in the real world here that COVID-19 will continue. So we hope that it will be reauthorized and beyond December 30th, but in the absence of that actually happening, we feel it's important to supplement the health department budget to be able to keep these critical temporary staff that you heard Director O'Leary describe earlier, going beyond that for the second half of the fiscal year, so that we believe this amount would cover those expenses for the remainder of the fiscal year. Obviously, if we get CARES Act money, we won't have to utilize it, but we don't want the department running into a deficit, so knowingly running into a deficit here in the middle of the fiscal year. So that's what the request is about, and obviously we hope that that CARES will be eventually reauthorized and signed by some president, if not the current president, then hopefully the future president for 50 days or so.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Jarrett and Councillor Maori.
What is the balance of the general fund undesignated reserve?
So the general fund free cash was just certified by the state, and it was certified. Let me get the exact number just so I have it. Let's see. It was certified at $5.7 million. Of that, 2.1 million of it was our existing free cash balance, which just got recycled and carried back over again. And so we generated $3.6 million in new free cash, which was basically 3.6% of our FY20 budget. So that's what the certification was for. So now we have access to our free cash again. It goes away at the end of the fiscal year. And as in the past, we typically use it to fund one-time unanticipated costs, including snow and ice or legal or other sorts of issues like that. So this would be an example where there's an unanticipated, but most likely temporary overage in the city department.
And then, sorry if I should already know this, but at the end of, before the fiscal year, do we move it to a fiscal stability fund, or
Typically
it's carried over if we?
Our practice has been to actually move large amounts of chunks of free cash into our stabilization accounts. And so we will, the finance director will be developing an order to move parts of it into both our regular stabilization, our capital stabilization, and potentially the fiscal stabilization fund as well. The other thing to keep in mind is we also rely on this free cash to fund the capital program every year. That's one of the major funding sources for the capital program. So that's the other aspect. But yes, we do not generally leave funds, large amounts of funds to carry over. This year was a little bit different. I think the finance director was rightly concerned that we didn't know what was going to happen in terms of the early months of 2020, going into getting close to the end of the fiscal year. So we didn't actually want to. We wanted to keep additional free cash on hand as we closed out the fiscal year. Not knowing what we would be facing into the unknown of COVID as we got to the end of the fiscal year. So there was more than usual left in free cash that then just flowed back over and was recertified. But I can have the finance director expound upon that if she wants.
No, you covered it pretty well. We generated 5.7 in free cash, but really only 3.6 of that was new free cash, which results from turnbacks in city departments who don't expend their full appropriation, and it results from any revenues that come in higher than we anticipate. So last year we did leave, as the mayor said, about 2.1 million as a buffer going into this year. But as the mayor said, we're working on a plan which would bring to you probably in January, where we would recommend some amounts be appropriated to the various stabilization funds that the mayor just talked about.
Thank you both.
Director Wright, I'm going to ask, can you just lift up that furry head a little bit? That's just really teasing me just out of my view. Thank you. That is what I needed. I appreciate it.
Is that a handmade sweater?
Oh.
Are there other important questions? Oh, so good. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, it's an interactive sweater. I think you might have actually answered my question, Mayor. It was kind of along the same vein. I was looking to understand, when you were faced with a decision like this, why you draw from the general fund versus the stabilization fund. But I think it's because you said it was a one-time unanticipated cost. Is that correct in terms of?
That's correct. And typically we would use the free cash to backfill, as again, snow and ice, or if we had unanticipated legal expenses. In many years past, it used to be veterans benefits back when we were seeing huge spikes in our veterans benefits because of the wars in the Middle East. And so we would typically have to come back and supplement the veterans budget every year. So that's generally what we use the free cash account for.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think of another example. I guess I was thinking of the admin assistant for the Policing Review Commission came from the stabilization fund, and that was probably an unanticipated cost.
No, actually we didn't.
Oh.
No, actually we
didn't.
We actually appropriated that because we still had the ability to appropriate it because we hadn't set the tax rate yet. So you actually appropriated that into the budget. It was sort of that you set the budget at for July 1, and then you have one more opportunity before you set the tax rate to make final adjustments to the budget. So it was still within that window that was incorporated.
Okay, thank you. Good to understand.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion on this? There was. Roll call on a positive recommendation, please.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward with the positive recommendation. There's no other business, so we can adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe to adjourn. Roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
and Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay, we're adjourned and we're back into council, and we are taking up that order that we just discussed. So 20.156, in order to appropriate free cash, $60,000 to Health Department for temporary COVID-19 staffing.
Move to approve.
Motion was made by Councilor Maori, seconded by Councilor Labarge. Discussion. Okay. Seeing none, Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading. We will see it in 2 weeks for a second reading. Next, we are moving down to ordinances that have not yet been referred.
Yes,
we've
I'd
got-
like to make a motion that we refer 20.154, an ordinance relative to a stop sign on Edward Square.
Doing my
And-
job for me.
What?
I said you're doing my job for me.
Thank you. 20.155, an ordinance relative to parking on Middle Street.
Okay.
Referring to where?
Yeah.
Legislative matters.
I think, if I may, 20.154. I don't know, have these been to transportation and parking?
came
Are they from there?
Transportation,
Okay,
as did, yeah, they both came from transportation parking.
okay. And I will second the moving both as a group to refer them to legislative matters.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion to refer those both to legislative matters? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, those have been referred. Next, we're up to ordinances on second reading. So this is 20.139, an ordinance to add section 285-31 newspaper boxes.
Move to approve, please.
Second.
Motion is made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Labarge. Any discussion on second reading? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
and Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, that passed on second reading. Our last item on the agenda is a request for an extension of the deadline for submitting a report and recodification from the Special Committee for Review of Ordinances. So section 1-15.1C of the Code of Ordinances requires the Special Committee for Review of Ordinances to file a report with the City Clerk no later than December 31st of the year in which its review is conducted. The Ordinance Review Committee hereby requests an extension of this deadline by 3 months from December 31st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. As you may recall, because of the pandemic, this review of ordinances committee was convened late, got started late, and the request is that they have extra time to complete this. The chair.
I was going to say move to approve to put it on the floor for purposes of discussion.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Jarrett. Would the chair like to?
I would.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are respectfully requesting an extension for 3 months to March 31st of 2021. As Council Presidents here just explained, we got off to a late start, and normally this committee would have had 6 months to do their ordinance reviews, and we've only been 3 months in. And so far, we've been not only looking at the ordinances from a social justice lens, but we've also received some ordinances cleanup from the Office of Planning and Sustainability. We've looked at ordinances involving vehicles and traffic. We're waiting for ordinances cleanup from the Department of Public Works. And so our work is not going to be completed by December 31st. So we're respectfully requesting to go 3 months out to allow us time to get everything put together for our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this request? Councilor Maori, then Councilor Dwight.
Yeah, I just, first I want to say thank you to Councilors Lavarge and Thorpe and the residents working on this, because to me, it's somewhat of a daunting task, kind of vetting ordinances. So I think it's totally reasonable to have an extension. I think the timing of the periodic ordinance review is actually kind of ideal, since I've been seeing municipal ordinance reviews as kind of a tenet listed as an integral part of proactive anti-racist and anti-bias work. And we as council, have just passed a resolution acknowledging systemic racism as a public health crisis. So it's a big job, and I want you to have sufficient time so you can, do substantive and meaningful work on this.
Councilor Dwight.
I will second what Council Maori said. And given the circumstances, the large charge, the impressive and awesome charge that actually you have been given, this is not what any previous ordinance review committee has had to experience or face. And I actually am grateful that you had the courage to ask for more time rather than rush the process, because this is very important. So I'm very appreciative and have no problem supporting this motion.
Thank you. And I think the committee members would be very appreciative of that as well. And we're going to do as much as we can, realizing that there are so many ordinances we will not be able to get to. But our report will be ready by that end date and or before, and we will go from there.
If I may, it's worth noting that the reason you also have a large amount of things on your plate is the previous ordinance review committee also found that even given the scope and time that they were allotted, they couldn't possibly address all the things that needed addressing. And then we added to that agenda the very critical feature of looking at this through a lens of social justice, and creating a very critical form of analysis that didn't stand before. So know that there's in no way do I think that this committee has come up lacking. I am very impressed with the work that you've done so far as you've iterated, and I think you should know that you're not charged with doing all the ordinances. It's not possible. It's not possible. So I appreciate the ones that you are selecting based on the priorities that you have. So very grateful. Thank you so much to you and your entire committee.
Okay, I echo those deep thanks, and just I'm so appreciative of this really intensive work that you all are doing, and I'm very happy to grant that extension. I also want to acknowledge Councilor Nash, who is on the committee, who I think wasn't mentioned before.
Apologies. Yes, I couldn't think of everyone on it at the time.
If I may, Councilor Scheer, not only do we have Councilor Nash, but we have Councilor Marianne Labarge as well. We also have Jeff Napolitano. We have Megan Pegg, who is our vice chair. And I also got to acknowledge City Solicitor Alan Seawald, who has been extremely helpful in the legal department, along with Laura Krutzler, who's been phenomenal herself in helping us organize and putting the agenda together. So it's a great team altogether.
Thank you for acknowledging everyone. I'm really grateful. And yes, thank you, Laura, who this was no small additional task to the work that she already does to take on. So very, very grateful and appreciative. Any other comments? Kudos. Okay. So roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
and Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, you have your extension.
Thank you.
There is nothing else on our agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Second it.
Motion's been made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Labarge. Roll call. Oh,
Yeah,
I
the
see.
mayor
someone-
is a furry
yeah, thirded by
sweater.
Scout. Roll call, please, Laura, on adjourning.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Oh,
Hey, aw.
everyone's
Counselor
got.
Labarge,
Where are my cats when I need them?
Do it again. I missed it. Hold it.
Oh,
He's cute. Oh,
no, she's a little
Counselor
Sorry, Laura, were you
Maori,
doing something?
camera shy.
yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and Counselor Quinlan.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. I expect even